1975 saying we want freedom, but it wouldn't have gotten rid of the British. Well, that's why we have to look to other instruments of change, I think, and we can see some of those as functional. Certainly we don't want to look for Mickey Mouse instruments, but I do see the value of the mass mobilization, of the boycott, of the strike, of all of these tools that are being developed hopefully for a century to come that will be marked by peaceful change, but by powerful change on the part of people that will be willing not to go to work if they're going to have to be confronted with the quality of air that we have and things of that nature. I want to ask you about something else, Noam. There is this situation going on in Kampuchea that's a little worrisome. Now, with the presence of the Vietnamese, we had the Pol Pot forces under control. Now the Vietnamese have left, and I know Dan Quayle was recently saying we're going to support the
Why the fuck is everyone supporting me?
In Kampuchea. Does he consider the Pol Pot forces to be part of that so-called non-communist resistance? What is going on here? I guess what Dan Quayle has in his mind or on his paper, but people who pay attention to what's going on and aren't simply reading their lines know very well that the non-communist resistance means the Khmer Rouge. They're the fighting forces. Prince Sihanouk is a kind of a nominal political leader, but the fighting forces are overwhelmingly Khmer Rouge, and that's in true Pol Pot forces, in other words. Now, they have been rebuilt after they were driven out by the Vietnamese and Vietnam invaded in December 1978. The Khmer Rouge Pol Pot forces were pretty much driven out of the country. They were then rebuilt in Thailand, primarily by China and Thailand, our two major allies, and with U.S. support, not just tacit support. I mean, it was clear that that was happening, and the purpose was stated very clearly by our closest friend, our favorite Chinese leader, Deng Xiaoping, who pictured great time.
Why are you fucking supporting me?
He said the purpose is to make Vietnam suffer more and more. Every time we put a gun in the hands of the Khmer Rouge, it kills Vietnamese and makes them suffer. And the overriding thrust of U.S. policy in those years, and still today, is to punish Vietnam. If Cambodians die on the side, that's too bad. So we're now, for years we've been claiming that the reason for the embargo and isolation of Vietnam is because they invaded Cambodia, and that we wouldn't end the embargo and isolation until they withdrew from Cambodia. Well, they've withdrawn from Cambodia, and now that pretense has disappeared, and it turns out that we're going to maintain the embargo and the isolation. We're going to continue bleeding Vietnam, and we're going to, now the new policy is, well, we're going to continue it until there's a comprehensive, verified...
Where are you, Kobe? You fucking noob.
We also, at the same time, say there can't be a verified political settlement.
No, Kobe. Here comes Maureen. Gone.
To me, once again, on this point, it's a question of the desperate need of our people to know what is happening. I'm really sorry.
Oh, is that you, Kobe? Kobe, you late, mate?
Thank you very much for being with us today. And you've been listening to Controversy and Action with Dr. Noam Chomsky and Dr. Blaise Fontaine. Controversy and Action is produced by the Americas. For a copy of today's program, you can stay with us right here on KPFA, and we'll have a copy of this program. It's called
Smashed.
Office of the Americas, and you've been listening to Blaise Fontaine, the host of the program, and he is a programmer at our sister station in Los Angeles, KPFK. You're listening to listener-sponsored radio, KPFA and KPFB in Berkeley, KFCF in Fresno. It's 28 minutes after 5 o'clock, and this is the very final pledge break in KPFA's November fundraising drive. So we're hoping to raise $1,000 right now, which would bring us up to the $70,000 mark. $70,000, a round number for listener-sponsored KPFA. If you're... Boy, something's gonna happen. I mean, everybody now, there's not even debate, accepts that people are coming out of school, being passed on from grade to grade.
massive. Who the fuck is still... Right, James. Fucking hell. Same. Yeah, that's you, Kobe. That's you. That's you. 4-3. Wait, you're getting it. Careful. Oh, stone and iron, stone and iron.
Good afternoon, and welcome. I'm Kim Vanden.
So, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Noam Chomsky. Thanks. After the introduction, I think maybe I ought to give a campaign talk for Jill Stein. I'm disciplined, so I'll talk about what I was asked to talk about, which is Iraq and the connection between Iraq and the so-called war on terror. There is a connection. It's pretty thin, but it's been drawn. Intelligence agencies have pointed out that they can't detect any real connection between Iraq and the terrorist networks, Al-Qaeda and the rest, which isn't too surprising. But there is a connection, nevertheless, and it's been pointed out. Namely, we can create a link if we want. And the best way to create the link would be by attacking Iraq. It's expected widely that if we do attack Iraq, that's very likely to ignite terrorist attacks, maybe that are already being planned as a possible deterrent. And it's very likely to spawn a new generation of terrorists who will be seeking revenge and also deterrence. And the deterrence is not a slight matter. Those of you who've been following the international relations literature, I'm going to be very establishment in this talk. I'm only going to quote people right in the mainstream. People who've been following it know that leading scholars, respected figures in international relations, have been pointing out for some time, in fact, well before Bush, that U.S. adventurism is stimulating the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction as a deterrent. That's not just countries that are being specifically targeted for attack, but others who are concerned about deterring a state that seeks, I'm quoting now, unilateral world domination through absolute military superiority, and is becoming a menace to itself and the world under a radical nationalist leadership. I've been quoting Kenneth Waltz, well-known figure in international relations, and Anatol Yevin, who's the senior associate of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. In fact, even real hardliners are expressing pretty serious concern. So one of the leading military and strategic analysts is concerned primarily with the Middle East, Anthony Cordesman, who's about as hardline as you can get within anything that might be called the spectrum of sanity. He's been he warned recently against what he called the neoconservative fantasies of the sillier armchair strategists and their plans for reconstructing the Middle East and maybe the world. He was referring to Richard Pearl and Douglas Feith, but that also includes Wolfowitz, Rumsfeld, others, who all happen to be very close to the extreme right wing in Israel. So you're getting quite a lot of clear and good reporting from the mainstream Israeli press about them. As maybe you know, Richard Pearl, who's very close to the center of planning now, and Douglas Feith were writing position papers for Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's new foreign minister, who's well to the right of Ariel Sharon. They were doing that in the 1990s, and that's their connections and contacts. And it's not understandable that even a hardline military analyst like Cordesman is worried about their sillier proposals, which are in fact being thought about and may be implemented. Why? That's about the only connection I know of between Iraq and terrorism at the moment. We can stimulate terrorism if we really intend to. So why Iraq? Obviously not in order to stimulate terrorism. Well, before going to that, begin with a kind of a truism, which should be unnecessary to mention. In the case of either the threat of or resort to violence, the burden of proof is always on those who advocate it. So that's true whether it's domestic abuse or international affairs. And it's a heavy burden. Maybe there's an argument for it, but it's those who advocate force and violence who have to bear the burden, and it's a heavy one. You never need any arguments against the use of violence. That's automatic. You need an argument for it. It has to be a very strong one. That should be obvious, and I'll just put it in back. So why do they want to do it? Well, just to simplify, since time's brief, I'll pick two views that are expressed pretty prominently in the mainstream, and I'll quote mainstream analysts. So here's the first interpretation. Let's start with Yusuf Ibrahim in the International Herald Tribune a couple of days ago. He's a senior fellow of the Council on Foreign Relations and was a senior Middle East correspondent for the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal for about 30 years. He recently moved to the CFR recently. His interpretation is that the goals of the Bush administration are basically two. One, gaining short-term political advantage, and two, I'm quoting him now, turning Iraq into a private American oil pumping station. Well, there's a counter-argument to that, against that in the New York Times yesterday, or maybe a response to it, I don't know, by Serge Schmemann, who argues that kind of disparages the oil relationship on the grounds that there's not going to be an instant bonanza for Iraqi oil. That's true, but it's not a very persuasive argument. I mean, by the same argument, you can prove that nobody was interested in Iraqi oil 80 years ago, or Texas oil, or Saudi Arabian oil, or Venezuelan oil, or certainly not Alaskan or North Sea oil. I mean, really expensive to get at. So by that argument, yeah, it's true, you're not going to get billions of dollars tomorrow, and it'll take development funds.
Where are you, Kobe?
The argument is very weak. In fact, much
Fucking
weaker
noob.
in the case of Iraqi oil, which
Kobe, noob.
fast and relatively easily accessible than it was in numerous other cases. So I think we can dismiss the counter-argument. Which was, I think, a front-page story in the Times Week in Review yesterday. Well, that's Yusuf Ibrahim. Yevon, who I quoted before, has a more detailed analysis along the same lines. He suggests that the Bush administration, the political aspect, is following, I'm quoting him, the classic modern strategy of an endangered right-wing oligarchy, which is to divert mass discontent into nationalism, inspired by fear of enemies about to destroy us. And he speaks for many people in the world when he regards that as the government's policies now as a menace to itself, meaning the country, and to the world. September 11th provided a pretext for resort to force, not just for the United States, that's worldwide, and it was so the Russians and Chechnya and Chinese against their Western minorities, Indonesia and Aceh, Israel and the occupied territories, and all over the world were repressive governments that were engaged in violent repression used September 11th as a pretext to intensify it under the guise of the war on terror, and assuming correctly that they'd get a nod of approval from the boss. And it's not too surprising that the U.S. itself would adopt the same idea. So yes, 9/11 was a pretext, and it was also used as a pretext to discipline populations throughout the world, again under the guise of a war on terror, and that ranges from the Central Asian dictatorships all the way over to the more democratic countries, including our own. So the fact that September 11th would prove a pretext for a war in Iraq is not a great surprise. And in fact, this was pointed out also to pursue the domestic political agenda, as Evan points out, natural for an endangered right-wing oligarchy to do that, especially when it's carrying out quite an extensive attack against the domestic population. It's not a big secret, or it shouldn't be. In the U.S., that was pointed out right away for example, by Paul Krugman and one of his well-known economists and one of his regular New York Times columns.
Holy shit.
That literally before
Holy shit.
over the World Trade Center ruins, influential Republicans signaled that they were determined to use terrorism as an excuse to pursue a radical right-wing agenda. And he and others have been documenting how they've been following that course ever since. Again, shouldn't be a secret, so I won't
Holy shit.
pursue it. The Beast of Baghdad was then
Who the
brought
fuck
in
is going for
to be
monsters?
an even more terrifying threat. And there are also independent reasons. There is a long-standing goal, Ibrahim and others are surely correct, and it's kind of obvious. It's been a long-standing goal to restore to U.S. control the second largest oil reserves in the world. It's been recognized ever since the mid-40s, the State Department in 1945, that this is a major component of what they called a stupendous source of strategic power and one of the greatest material prizes in world history, and a major theme of U.S. foreign policy since the Second World War has been to make sure that the U.S. Dominates it. France was expelled on the interesting grounds that it was an enemy state since it had been occupied by Germany, so therefore its contracts were void, and England was slowly reduced to what the Foreign Office calls British Foreign Office calls a junior partner. The U.S. puts it differently. 40 years ago, a senior statesman, probably Dean Acheson, in internal discussion described Britain as our lieutenant. The fashionable word is partner. And they like to hear the fashionable word, but the reality is the actual word. And control over Middle East oil has been a very large part of it from the Second World War. Let me stress that it's control, it's not access. There's a lot of confusion. The United States really doesn't care much about access to Middle East oil. From up until 1970, didn't care at all.
3:57 go.
Since then, the biggest importer has usually been Venezuela. If you look at U.S. intelligence projections, for example, the National Intelligence Council projections for the next 15 years, they predict and suggest that the U.S. should rely on a more secure Atlantic basin of resources, West Africa and Latin America. But that has nothing to do with control over Middle East oil. Now, that has to do with its being one of the greatest material prizes in world history, which means that whoever controls it can have an effect on setting price and production levels, can also determine that the wealth, vast amount of the wealth, flows right back here, and it does. It's independent of access to wealth. A stupendous source of strategic power has nothing to do with access. That has to do with it translates as a lever of world control, and that's been recognized clearly since the 1940s, and it remains true today. Well, September 11th gave a pretext. The domestic politics affects the timing. And the strategy has been working quite brilliantly. You see it right now in the midterm elections. It's going to be even more important next year, presumably, if you put yourselves in, say, Karl Rove's shoes, Bush's campaign manager. When the presidential campaign begins, a little over a year, do you really want people to be thinking about what's happening to their pension, or how they're going to take care of their elderly mother, or what about their job, or why can't they get health care? What about an environment that their children might live in? Things like that are certainly not what they want people to be paying attention to. They'll want people to be, singing praises to the brave cowboy who saved them from destruction at the hands of a colossal foe, sort of Martian foe, and will by then be marching on to some new adventure. Exactly as Gibbon says, that's the tradition, that's the classic strategy of an endangered right-wing oligarchy, which wants to divert mass content, which has plenty of ground, into nationalism and fear. And it takes a lot of work to overlook the fact that the only people who are afraid of Condoleezza Rice's mushroom cloud, which is going to consume us imminently, the only people who are afraid of it are Americans, not the people of the region, for example. And they're afraid, but they're afraid of the United States more than they are of Iraq. Of course, Iraqis are afraid of Saddam Hussein, and they have every right to be, but that can't possibly be the reason for the U.S. war. The U.S. was supporting Saddam right through his worst atrocities, helping him develop weapons of mass destruction right up to the day of the invasion of Kuwait. It's the same people who are running Washington right now, so whatever the reasons are, it's not that. They're afraid of Saddam Hussein, but they also know they can't do very much. In fact, very little. If he made a move anywhere, practically knows that. People in the region know that. But even the U.S. press, the national press, which is usually highly supportive of power, now recognizes that, quoting, the world is more concerned about the unbridled use of American power than it is about the threat posed by Saddam Hussein. It's a leading story in Christmas Night's Monitor a couple days ago, and it's been pointed out by others. So there definitely is a security issue. There's a problem of securing the agenda of the radical right-wing oligarchy and making sure that they can continue for another 4 years to undermine living standards, destroy social policy, concentrate the wealth in a very narrow sector of an unusually corrupt part of the business establishment, as Berkman and many others have been pointing out. And to pursue that, to secure that agenda is very serious. And it is a security problem, and that's about the only security problem we can seem to conjure up, but it's real, of course. Well, that's one interpretation. One interpretation, within the mainstream establishment, is what I just said. There's a long-term goal of regaining control of
Fucking Kobe, you noob.
ensuring domination of the...
No, how many 302s? It's like fucking Rule 302.
Strategic power. September 11th gave a pretext, as it gave a pretext around the world for intensification of violence.
Hello.
Populations and domestic considerations, and that very important security problem. They probably account for the timing. So it has to be this winter, not next winter. That'll be too late. But then we'll have been consumed by the mushroom cloud. Avoid everyone else, but get us. And of course, it's kind of like an accident that that'll be right in the middle of the presidential campaign. Just as it's an accident that the people of the region are afraid, but it's mostly of us, and joining much of the world in that. Well, that's one interpretation. Incidentally, all of this is not only the classic strategy of an endangered right-wing oligarchy under a radical nationalist leadership, as Levin points out. But it's also second nature to the people in Washington. Remember that the people running the show are recycled Reaganites, almost entirely. They come out of the Reagan administration when they were doing precisely the same thing. I mean, the first thing, when they came into office, when the Reagan administration came into office in 1981, first thing it did was declare a war on terror, with pretty much the same rhetoric as today. At that time, Americans had to be terrified by Libyan hitmen who were wandering in the streets of Washington, planning to kill our leader, another brave cowboy, who was hiding in the White House surrounded by tanks. I mean, if you're old enough, you'll remember that, or your parents will. That was 20 years ago. And they had to be worried about the Sandinistas, who were only 2 days marching time from Texas, the brave cowboy told us.
Fucking lag.
The script of Mein Kampf in their plan to conquer the hemisphere, not beyond. That was George Shultz, the administration moderate, the Colin Powell of the day. And there was a national emergency call renewed every year because of the threat to the U.S. security and survival posed by people like that, for example, by Gaddafi, who was planning to expel America from the world, according to Reagan, leading speechwriters.
Not too bad.
People were afraid. And this is traditionally a very frightened society. You can ask about the reasons, but it's well known. Americans happen to be more frightened of almost anything than most other people. There's all kinds of historical reasons, but it's clearly true that crime, aliens, drugs, you name it. There's a lot of fear. And it's not hard to stir up fear among the population.
That's one we'll see.
So all of it is absolutely second nature to the guys making policy today, and it wouldn't be too surprising if that's what they're planning. Well, my time's just about running out, but which is fine, because there is another view, which I unfortunately skipped since there's no time, and that's what you hear every time George Bush or Tony Blair or reads from their note cards or maybe makes it up themselves. We can, and you're familiar with that, so I'm not going to repeat it. Push down to this. We could run through the arguments, I don't know if it's necessary, but more interesting in a way is just to accept all the claims as true. So let's say everything they say is true. Okay? If you can, then run a little experiment. It's pretty easy to show that if the claims are true, there are very simple ways to meet the announced goals. Just talking about sending back inspectors, there are other ways if you decide that a war is necessary. Measures that really haven't been considered. Kind of instructive to ask why, but I'll stop there since time's running out.
Oh, fuck yeah. Let's have it.
Hi, so my name's Ryan Cunningham, and I'm a first-year student at Kennedy School. You sort of ended your speech with a big blank, and I want to give you the chance to fill it. I'm very curious to know, what else could the government be doing, and as private citizens, what can we really do to be effective in letting the government know how we feel?
Government can do. The easiest thing that the government can do is, it's kind of like asking, if suppose you had a battered wife in front of you, and you ask, well, what else can a husband do? Well, one thing you do is stop powering. Okay, that's one possibility. That's pretty straightforward. And as I said, the burden of proof is you're asking the wrong question. The burden of proof is on those who advocate violence. You don't need an argument against them. Okay? They have to do the argument. So what can the government do? Well, it can do what the rest of the world wants, for example. It can stop desperately trying to block inspections. And it can go along with allowing inspections. Okay? That's one thing it can do. If they really believe everything they're saying, and I doubt that they do, there are other simple we never discussed, but there are simple proposals. But the easiest one is just to allow the inspectors back. They've done far more to eliminate Saddam's weapons than bombing did, or sanctions. And the inspectors had a big effect. They're not going to find everything. You know,
Fuck. I'm 22.
it's a lot when Rumsfeld says, well,
I'm still fighting.
sure they'll find
Fuck.
everything. He's surely correct. I mean, if the country has a high school...
Woo! Thank fuck. I wasn't late.
capacity to develop biological
Kobe, you were late.
we can't. So the only way to find everything is...
Oh, fuck yeah.
But nuclear weapon development...
Nice one.
So if that's what anyone's concerned about, yeah, you can handle that. There's just...
That's fucking awesome.
Intelligence agencies are... when they do. So I'm saying the likelihood that they'll be involved...
Oh, nice.
Citing or supporting terrorist acts is extremely low. If you're worried about nuclear weapons being put together in a New York hotel room, which is not impossible. In fact, there are technical papers in the literature 4 or 5 years ago saying that things like that have a far higher probability of success than a missile attack. If you're worried about that, then worry about the loose nukes in the world, like in former Soviet Union or in Pakistan, which is a really serious threat. But since the people in Washington aren't hopeful, don't care about it very much. They're not doing it. So yes, there are easy things to do like that. There are also other, if war is necessary, there's
Here we go.
proposals and what's
Fucking so many people yapping.
I like to call you on your Rockian call to inaction always. You advocated inaction in the face of the genocide in Bosnia and in several other incidences that are similar to that.
And you referred to some place where I referred to inaction.
Well, Bosnia was one.
Well, can you refer to the place where I did it?
You called for inaction.
Can you mention a place where I referred to inaction? Can you cite a source?
Well, I don't have any.
Well, you don't have one that none exists. What you're doing is paying attention to gossip from various elements. If you
Speaking of
think
gossip, sir,
if you
I
think
like to
there's a
call you
source
on the light you bring I like to bring you to the light you bear.
Let's go.
When you talk about the damage that terrorism causes. Terrorism causes dramatic instability in the Pacific. It's caused dramatic instability in New York, and that has dire economic causes or effects.
That's why I've been opposed to terrorism for years. I was arguing against the, 20 years ago, I was writing about the Reagan administration's massive terrorist war, and I continue to do it up till today.
35-30.
What concrete steps would you advocate the United States do as a superpower to combat terrorism? Besides nothing.
Right. Well, first of all, there's no one easy way to reduce terrorism, the easiest possible
Who the
way
fuck is that farming?
That already is a very substantial factor. Huge, in fact, right up to the present. I'll give you, if you don't know examples, I'll be glad to list them for you. Second, if to talk about that much smaller category of terrorism that's directed against the West, okay, and it exists and it's serious. Let's say Al-Qaeda style terrorism. Well, of course, one way to reduce it is to stop fostering. So remember where these groups came from. These are the groups that were organized, trained, and armed by the CIA.
All the you fuckers.
About Afghanistan. As late as 1993, after the first attempt to blow up the World Trade Center, which came awful close to succeeding, Bill Clinton was sending Al-Qaeda members, at least Afghanis, Islamic radicals from Afghanistan, along with Hezbollah people, flying them to Bosnia to fight the U.S. side in that war. Well, that's one way to monitor that. Bali bombing is another case if you want to look at it closely. So another way to reduce terrorism is to stop fostering and organizing terrorists around the world. But let's take the attacks against the United States.
Fucking
like
hell.
9/11. How do you deal with that? Well, one way of dealing it is by bombing Afghanistan, which, as far as anyone, according to U.S. intelligence at least, had almost no effect on terrorism. It may have extended. That's U.S. intelligence. There are ways, however, to reduce threats like that, and we know what they are.
Yay.
For careful police work. So, for example, primarily in Germany, is by looking at the grievances. You want to deal with terrorism? Every serious scholar, the head of every intelligence agency, anyone who has their head screwed on, knows that you do with it by looking at where it comes from.
Where are you, Kobe? You noob?
For you, the head of Israeli Shabak and the head of Israeli military intelligence, including scholars here and so on, yeah, they all say the same thing, just as Britain finally found out. You want to deal with IRA terrorism, there's no use, wouldn't do any good to bomb Belfast or to bomb Boston, for example, where the financing came from. What made sense, first they tried violence, that just increased the terrorism. Finally, they started paying some attention to grievances, which are quite real, and there's been some progress, and that's true all over. So yeah, there are a lot of ways to deal with terrorism, but the main way is to stop participating in it.
My name's Shahai Wartanian. I'm an undergraduate. Before I say anything, I want to thank you for all your books written. They're quite prolific, and my friends and I, we sit around reading them. We enjoy it very much.
Sure, you have better things to do than that.
And what I wanted to say was that I'm reading a number of articles on this question, whether we ought to go to war or not, and I read a piece that said that Hussein has gone into the north and executed a lot of the Kurdish folks that are up there, and that commits genocide up there, and that the link to terrorism resides with the fact that he gives $25,000 to the families of suicide bombers, so that there's a monetary link there. You're asking about a connection, so I would say that it resides with
those two things. So let's take those two things. Sorry.
I'm almost done.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's those two that he's broken United Nations resolutions.
Fucking noobs. Why are you putting signs below the fucking sign? Fucking
That
signs
he's,
after it.
to stabilize the region, and that it's
I'm familiar with the argument.
case for war.
So what is the question? What does one say about those things?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go through. So it's perfectly true. Let's go back to the main arguments that are given. I mean, every speech of Blair and Bush and the British dossier, or let's take the New York Times a couple days ago, which had a big insert taken from Kennedy School, incidentally, from a Kennedy School research project on crimes of Saddam Hussein. And what was charged is all correct. Only one thing is missing in all of these accusations. With our support. Yeah, he invaded Iraq. He used chemical weapons in the war. He used gas against what's called his own people. The Kurds are his own people in the sense that the Cherokees are Jackson.
Fucking right, Bob.
But yeah, he used gas against the Kurds. He then carried out the Anfal massacre, maybe killed 100,000 of them or so, always with the firm support of the United States and Britain. Okay? In fact, of the people who are now in charge, who don't even have the minimal decency to say, well, we did something wrong. What they do is leave out the words "with our support," and everyone who reports it leaves out the words "with our support," which continued, including giving him means to develop weapons of mass destruction, missiles, nuclear weapons, biological and chemical weapons, and all that went on literally up to the day of the invasion of Kuwait. And in fact, he did invade Kuwait when he was a U.S. ally, just as he invaded Iran when he was a U.S. ally. So yeah, he committed all of those crimes, and those are by far the worst crimes in his record, with our support. The next worst crimes on his record are in March 1991, after the war, right? After the when there was a Shiite uprising, which probably would have overthrown him. There were rebelling Iraqi generals who didn't ask the U.S. for... Remember, that's the time when the U.S. had total control of the region. Total. It's after the war. But the people who are now in Washington decided to support their old friend Saddam. So they refused to allow rebelling Iraqi generals access to captured arms. They authorized Saddam to use military helicopters and other weapons, and he killed tens of thousands more people while they watched. And they had a reason, an official reason. They said the reason is because we need what's called stability. We want to make sure that Iraq doesn't break up. It was explained rather well by the chief diplomatic correspondent of the New York Times, well and approvingly, Thomas Friedman, said, well, they said the best of all worlds for the United States would be an iron-fisted military junta ruling Iraq the same way Saddam did, but with a different name, because this one's kind of embarrassing.
What the fuck?
So those are his worst crimes by far. Did he violate UN resolutions? Sure. No, he's hardly the only one. Actually,
What the
people
fuck?
point out correctly that Israel's violated many more, but that's missing the point. If Iraq had think for a minute, if Iraq had the capacity to veto Security Council resolutions, it wouldn't be in violation of any of them. I mean, the main way to violate Security Council resolutions is to veto them.
Fucking
And who's in the lead in vetoing
for
Security
fuck's
Council
sake.
resolutions? Ever since the UN fell out of control with
Sake.
colonization, so say since the 1960s.
Fucking
Well, the
noobs,
US
mate.
is far
Fucking
in the lead,
noobs.
Britain second, nobody else even in shouting distance. And it's on all kinds of issues. So, for example, the U.S. is the only country on record as vetoing a
Who's
resolution
fucking
calling on all
speeding?
states
What a
to observe
fucking
international law.
joke.
Okay, that was
Ugh.
after
Fucking.
the U.S. had rejected the World Court ruling ordering it to stop its terrorist attacks against Nicaragua. So, yeah, there are plenty of countries that are in violation of Security Council resolutions. That's true.
Fucking noobs.
Let me just add one word, because I forgot to talk about the alleged $25,000 to the suicide bombers. That may or may not be true. I've never seen a source for it, but let's say it's true. Before there were any suicide bombers, it was also reported by the same sources that Saddam Hussein was giving
Fuck's sake.
$10,000 to the families of anyone who was killed by Israeli
Recorded.
atrocities. There were plenty of them. Well, should he have been doing that? So
Should.
let's take, say, the first month of the current Intifada. I'm just relying now on IDF sources, Israeli army sources. What they say is that in the first few days of the Intifada, the Israeli army fired 1 million bullets. Okay? One of the high military officers said that means 1 bullet for every child. Within the first month of the Intifada, they killed about 70 people, okay, using U.S. helicopters. And in fact, Clinton shipped new helicopters to Israel as soon as they started using them against civilians. That's just the first month. And at that point, and it goes on, no suicide bombers. At the time, it was reported that Saddam Hussein was giving $10,000 to every family. Well, is that supporting terror? I mean, it seems to me sending helicopters to Israel when they're using them to attack apartment complexes, that's supporting terror.
Lucy Nesbetta from the Kennedy School. Could you please discuss the doctrine of Pax Americana as an organizing principle for U.S. foreign policy?
Well, you're
She's
referring,
saying
for example, to the National Security Strategy report from a month ago.
What the fuck
that
are you
was pretty
spamming
brazen,
for?
Which everybody knows it, so I don't have to repeat it. It was a pretty brazen statement, and it's part
No,
of the
not
reason
speed.
why
Time
much
attack,
of the
you
world,
fucking
including
noobs.
Europe, regards the United States as a menace to itself and the world. To quote Zievin again, yeah, it's part of the reason. It frightened the Europeans and others. On the other hand, if you think about it, Colin Powell pointed out in a press conference right afterwards that it wasn't all that new. And that even the preemptive strike doctrine, he said, was not all that new from the extreme. It's an old principle. And the U.S. didn't invent it, of course. It's just the U.S. is by far the most powerful state, so when it proposes it, it means something. But you can trace it right back to the time when the U.S. became a major global power after the Second World War. And before that, it was also true, but in the region. That's called the Monroe Doctrine, in fact. It goes back to the, when Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, 40 years ago, ordered his staff to unleash the terror to the earth against Cuba, escalating an already ongoing international terrorist campaign. The reason was that, you can read it in the declassified record now, the reason was that the very existence of the Castro regime was a successful defiance of the United States and of a policy of 150 years that the United States had been following. Namely, it was the existence of a regime which was not following U.S. order. And they traced it back 150 years, so therefore we had to carry out a major terrorist campaign that goes right into the 1990s. So yeah, Colin Powell was correct. It's not good. And furthermore, it's even on the public record. You don't have to go to the declassified record. So if you go back again 40 years, it's from the Kennedy School to the Kennedy administration in 1962, 62 or 63, right about then, 62 I think, senior statesman and Dean Acheson, senior Kennedy advisor, gave an important speech to the American Society of International Law. He was talking about the U.S. Economic warfare against Cuba, which
Go,
was
Karma.
widely recognized as illegal and by
You noob.
every
Karma, you noob.
relevant body, including even the normally compliant Organization of American States, has declared it to be illegal. At the time, the terrorist war was already underway, but it wasn't that public, except of course Cubans who knew all about it. But what he told the American Society of International Law, that in the case of a U.S. response, he said that no legal, I'm quoting it now, no legal issue arises, no legal issue in the case of a U.S. response to a challenge to its power, position, or prestige. Okay, that actually goes beyond the Bush doctrine announced a month ago, and that's the other end of the spectrum. That's the Kennedy administration.
Fucking yes.
And there are plenty of examples in between. The same is true of preemptive strikes. The idea of a preemptive nuclear strike, which was kind of announced, not those words, but everyone understands it in the so-called Bush doctrine, also a Clinton doctrine. Have a look at the major study of Clinton's
Shit.
plan, which is from 1995. It's called Essentials in Post-Cold War Deterrence, partially declassified. It's the major document sort of working out a post-Cold War strategy. One of the things it advocates is what it calls preemptive response. Nice phrase. Think about it. Preemptive response, including nuclear weapons against non-nuclear states.
Fucking shit, that fuck.
If considered necessary. Okay? It also explains the background. It says we have to
Ooh.
convey a national persona of the irrational.
Fuck yeah, that's a speedy.
That, they say, will frighten people. In the professional
T39.
political science and international relations is a term for it. It's called establishing credibility. That's very important. You've got to establish credibility. You want to know what that means? Ask your neighborhood mafia don. Explain to you what it means. You don't just collect protection money.
Blame the noobs. We'll have a look.
What you do is beat them to a pulp. That establishes credibility. Then others know who's the boss. And that's the way international relations work too. So yeah, there's a direct precedent there, and you can trace it back quite far.
Hello, I'm John Mensing. I'm a first-year MPP here at the Kennedy School. And we've talked a lot tonight about the U.S.'s motivations here, kind of simple.
Fucking my head hurts as well. Fucking cuddles. Orby.
Is the world going to be a better place if Saddam is out of power? Regardless of our motivations behind this regime change, wouldn't we still be better off if this, by all accounts, sort of nasty guy was out of power?
What the fuck? Reset, you fucking noob.
Better off if the regime was out of power, which is regarded widely in the world, including Europe.
Fucking noob.
Yeah, we'd be better off. And in fact, there are plenty of
Fuck this.
brutal regimes around the world.
Fucking noob reset.
Saddam Hussein is certainly a threat to anyone within his reach. Just as he was when the current people in Washington were offering him.
Too many fucking people are typing.
And incidentally, explaining
Why the fuck are people typing?
war
We don't need your personality here.
because of our duty to
Just clear the fucking chat.
orders, as John Kelly, the
Fucking hell. Shut up, everyone, shut up. What the fuck is Reset doing there? Why is Solid Green? What the fuck are you doing? You fucking knobheads.
The world would be better off if a lot of regimes were out of power. I can list plenty of them. And some of them are pretty close to home. But what does that have to do with this? I mean, if we want to get rid of Saddam
Fuck's sake.
easier
We
ways.
could have a fucking big one here.
Easier ways by war.
Well done, Kiki.
Could you enlighten us on those easier ways?
Fairly obvious one.
Shut the fuck up, everyone.
Point out before even
Well done, Clicky.
suggestion is totally
Clicky, Kiki.
its only merit is that it's a lot
What the fuck? Just shut up.
Police Iran.
Fucking knobheads.
Logistic support and missiles and bombing, all from safe distance, let them do the fighting. That has lots of advantages
Fucking-
over what's being proposed. For one thing, just think about them for a minute. There's no point. They'll not only get rid of Saddam, they'll tear him
Who's saying
down.
go? Go to what?
They'll eliminate every weapons of mass destruction, which really threaten them.
I'm losing it now.
Furthermore, they'll do it for any successor regime, which the U.S. won't do. So therefore, they'll make a real
Fucking losing it.
disarmament in the region, and in fact, they'll even live up to a paragraph of the famous Resolution 687, which is always omitted when it's reported, namely the Article 14, which says that disarming Iraq should be part of general disarmament in the region. Okay, that makes sense. And by disarming successor regimes to Saddam, yeah, there'll be a big help there. Another advantage is there won't be any American casualties. Okay, there won't be any Israeli casualties. Nobody will be, no point shooting off Scuds at a country, at Israel, when its prime enemy is invading. That'd be ridiculous. So no casualties, that's fine. Plenty of Iraqi and Iranian casualties, but that can't possibly be a concern. I mean, the U.S. these guys in Washington were supporting massive Iranian and Iraqi casualties in the 80s. They continued through the 90s. Probably Saddam would use chemical weapons.
Fuck me.
Supported him when he did in the past, but continued to aid him in developing more. In fact,
Fuck yeah. I'm gonna record this shit.
Well, after that can't be it. No problems with the UN. Don't have to go through all that nonsense. If anybody bothered to stop the liberation of Iraq, the U.S. could veto it as usual, but it wouldn't come up anyway. No question that Iranian troops would probably be welcome in a large part of the country. Remember, most 60 or 65% of the country is Shiite, pro-Iranian, but they're much more likely to be welcoming the Iranian troops than the U.S.
Fuck's sake.
The rooftops thanking the liberators, and we can all join the Iranian journalists who are writing about the liberation and the noble effort and opening a new era of humanitarian intervention. We can all join in on that. We're spared the embarrassment of pretending that our leaders have suddenly gone through a miraculous conversion from a particle of evidence. They'll be able to do much better than we in introducing democracy in Iraq. I mean, the U.S. don't have a big problem with making sure that the large majority of the population has essentially no voice. If we want to talk to the Kurds, they'll be...
Where's our fucking target? Olga.
With regard to Kurds, most recently in Turkey, where the U.S. was right through in the Clinton administration, some of the worst atrocities of the 1990s were being carried out in southeastern Turkey, where millions of people were driven from their homes, tens of thousands were killed,
That's fucking bullshit.
torture you can imagine. In the single year 1997 alone, the Clinton administration sent more arms to Turkey than in the entire Cold War period combined, up to the onset of what is called, for example, in the Boston Globe this morning, the counter-terror campaign. Counter-terror is what we call Arab terrorism, right? So if you read the Globe this morning, we'll insert about the success of the counter-terror campaign, as this. Asking us to save the Kurds is not very substantial, and so on. So what's the matter with that? And in fact, why isn't it being discussed? 1 second. Notice it is being discussed, and there's a very good reason for it. It's crazy. I mean, it's totally crazy, but it's just a lot more reasonable than what is being proposed. And in fact, think it through in your spare time. There's only one flaw in this proposal. The flaw is it's not going to leave the United States in control of Iraqi oil, and it's not going to solve the domestic political problems of the reactionary right-wing oligarchy. Other than that, I don't see any flaws in it. So if those...
We have a distinguished fellow here at the Institute of Politics, one Ted Sorensen.
Mate, recorded all that shit.
Wild
while back in embarrassing the young questioner who didn't have specific citations to back up his questions to you, but when you come to the Kennedy School and attack John F. Kennedy, I'm listening. In two instances, you made two instances. First, you tried to charge